All right, so NBA opening night has officially ended. Both of the games that were on today had ended, and the season has officially begun. And I'm going to start with a recap of the Golden State Warriors versus the Brooklyn Nets game. The Nets dominated them in pretty easy fashion, 125-99, to get their cap off the first night of the season to get their first win. The biggest thing I caught from the Warriors side of this game is that they had a really hard time playing defense, and even what they did, they were even struggling to get rebounds. I mean, I understand that Draymond Green did not play tonight, and his impact on the defensive end and maybe even on the offensive end with playmaking could have made some sort of difference, but I think this game was just really out of reach for the Warriors tonight. They really had a hard time, defending, whether it was Kyrie giving them buckets, Kevin Durant having a very good return to the NBA. Good to see him come back. And Karis LeVert just dominate as sixth man off the bench. They just really struggled on all facets of the game tonight. Steph Curry, I'm pretty sure he didn't shoot too bad tonight, but he only played 3 quarters because the game was only, because the fourth quarter it was basically a blowout. I mean, it was a blowout since the second quarter, but the fourth quarter is when neither team really played anybody. It was just garbage time. He only had 20 points, but it was just a tough night for the Golden State Warriors, whether there was just guys not hitting shots, a lot of defensive lapses, or guys just not making the right plays in general. I kind of feel bad because if this is the kind of game, the kind of Warriors team we're going to see throughout the entire season, I could very well be convinced that this team just doesn't make the playoffs or they're just barely out of it. I mean, this is kind of how they played tonight. It's just lost to a Brooklyn Nets team that was making their debut as a squad. But regardless of that, I want to talk about Andrew Wiggins because he had a pretty god-awful night in terms of his scoring. Could never really get the lid off the basket. He didn't shoot too efficiently to say the least, for this game. Eric Paschall didn't really do much. I guess James Wiseman had a pretty fair debut, 19 points, 6 rebounds, but a lot of his points came from garbage time, so take that as you will. Kelly Oubre didn't really have much of a debut. I mean, only had 6 points, 7 rebounds. I mean, he had a nice put-back dunk over Kevin Durant. But for the rest of this team, I believe they went 13 guys deep because of the just garbage time minutes. It was just a hard game to watch at one point because Steph Curry looked fine, and Steph Curry wasn't the problem. He was hitting shots. He was able to get to the rim at will. He was making good plays for his teammates. But not only were they not hitting shots, but they weren't trying to get Steph open. One of the biggest things in Steph Curry's game that makes him very effective is his off-ball game. Him being able to come off screens, which is something that a lot of guard defenders have a hard time with, just with keeping up with Curry on these screens. And at the end of the day, Steph Curry can get pretty open. He can even shoot a 3 if contested and hit it in a fairly efficient rate. I mean, he's been a 40% three-point shooter for his entire career, so that's not really the issue there. The issue is that there's not many playmakers in the lineup that we saw today. I mean, Kelly Oubre is not going to really find guys open. James Wiseman, we saw a little bit of his passing ability today, but once again, he didn't play too many minutes in the meaningful part of the game today. I know Steve Kerr got him in there a lot just to get him the experience, and I know that he had just recently tested positive for COVID-19. But I think there's a lot of upside with James Wiseman that this team could see in the future. But there's also a reason to believe that this team doesn't really go far, and he might be a factor into that. But we're moving off of that. They just have to shoot better from 3. They shot under 40% from 3 for a team like this in Golden State with Stephen Curry on your team. You have to be a very good 3-point shooting team to succeed. I mean, that's just how it's going to have to work. Steph Curry's not going to, that's how he beats players. He's from his shooting. He's 6'3". He's not necessarily a athletic point guard. It's not like he's just taller than the rest. He's actually just an average point guard height. So they just have to shoot better from 3. I think figuring out how you're gonna mesh Oubre, Wiggins, and Wiseman into the rotation in the starting lineup is going to be important because Kelly Oubre is not necessarily known as a 3-point shooter. From that standpoint, I mean, he's a very good. He can handle the ball. He's a highlight reel for sure. But there's also times where I think that Kelly Oubre is just not going to, in terms of this Golden State offense where it's perimeter centric, I can see a reason where he doesn't necessarily thrive as much as we'd expect him to. I mean, he didn't really shoot well tonight either, but a team identity is also important for the Golden State Warriors. Figuring out what they're going to be long term. It was hard to see tonight. I mean, no reason to overreact tonight. Damian Lee didn't get much love, and he's honestly one of the better three-point shooters, so it's probably best to see him get more minutes in the long run. But at the end of the day, the Golden State Warriors, there's nothing really to overreact with. It's just how these guys are going to mesh, and maybe if Draymond Green can have a better impact. And for the Brooklyn Nets, they're one of the biggest strengths that they have is their bench. I mean, they have arguably a top bench in the NBA if they're all playing like they did today. Karis LeVert played like a starter today, and he's probably starting on most NBA teams. On this team, he's more effective as a six-man role. Jarrett Allen, him and DeAndre Jordan are pretty much interchangeable at the five, although DeAndre Jordan is probably going to work best as the center for this team. I know that Jarrett Allen played more minutes today, but that's just probably how it's going to go moving forward. Landry Shamet, started for the Clippers last year, a very good shooter. Jeff Green was really effective in Houston, so I really like their team. There's a lot of guys. I'm pretty sure everybody who was on the rotation played today, except for Chris Chiozza and Nicholas Claxton. But overall, this Warriors-Nets game was certainly an exciting one to watch at the start, and then after the second quarter or the end of the first quarter, it really became a slugfest, and it just kind of ended pretty right after the first quarter, honestly. But it was really nice to see Kevin Durant have a 22-point performance only in 25 minutes, which was impressive. And Kyrie he had 26, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds in his Nets return in 25 minutes. So it's a good performances from both those two. And just a pretty good performance all around. They were shooting well from the three. They just had a pretty good performance tonight. Now for this Clippers-Lakers game, it's definitely more close, more competitive. The first quarter was, the ring ceremony was really cool. As a Laker fan, I really liked seeing everybody get their rings, and it was much deserved. Obviously, we won the title. It's a good thing to see, but that first quarter was honestly what I feel like lost them this game, or not necessarily. They came back for sure, but I feel like that kind of set the stage for how this game was going to be played today. AD in 31 minutes only got 18 points. Definitely something that the Lakers, someone that they rely on a lot, and so if that's the kind of performances they're going to get from him, it's not necessarily going to be a cakewalk for them. LeBron certainly had a pretty rough first half. He started to get into it in the third quarter and got about 18 towards the end of it, but he was also not at his best today. Marc Gasol really struggled just in general today. Only played 12 minutes because it was foul trouble and really didn't do much today. Didn't even take a shot. Dennis Schroeder had one of the more exciting stat lines, although there's a reason to believe that some of his contributions were a reason that they lost today, which is very true. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope had a fair game. Montrezl Harrell had a very good debut as well, so Harrell and Schroeder had a pretty good debut, and just a couple other dud performances from the rest of their from the majority of the rest of the roster who did play. I mean, especially Wesley Matthews, not really doing anything in his 11 minutes and getting beat on almost every defensive possession that he had in an assignment. And for the Clippers, it was Paul George's night. He was absolutely fire from the field, very, very efficient. Serge Ibaka had a very fair game. Nicholas Batum, not the best game, but he was contributing in other ways, having 6 assists and 6 rebounds. Kawhi Leonard having a okay game, did not shoot very well tonight, but he still managed to get his 26 points in 34 minutes. Ivica Zubac off the bench for this season, it's likely going to be. He had 11 points, and there was also Lou Will who had a fair game, and just a couple, and that was pretty much it. But my biggest takeaway from this game was the Lakers just kind of were pretty much all into the ring ceremony. That just kind of threw them off. It was good to see them kind of get back into it mainly in the second quarter when the Clippers were definitely slowing down on the gas pedal. But that second half was really all Paul George, and the Lakers were definitely struggling to get offense at times. Dennis Schroeder definitely had a pretty fair game, doing everything. He had 12 rebounds and 8 assists and 14 points. However, there were times where Dennis Schroeder would just kind of dribble a lot and maybe try to throw the ball to somebody, but it was kind of a pretty bad pass because he wasn't necessarily in control. Anthony Davis, he had a lot of tough shots that he made, but at the same time, he wasn't really looking like a complete offensive threat tonight. Just definitely for AD and LeBron, they need to put up some better performances long term, which I don't think is going to be an issue. No reason to overreact for them. Kuzma had 15 points, but man, he was pretty awful tonight. I mean, I don't know what his plus minus was, but it sure had to be in the minus because his defense was absolutely atrocious, whether he was on Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, just absolutely getting dusted, just like Wesley Matthews. He did play 27 minutes, but even with those 15 points, they're not going to make up for his lackluster performance on the defensive end. Markieff Morris was okay in his minutes. I mean, I don't think he was much of anything. And Alex Caruso was pretty much a snooze fest as well. A lot of people think that Talen Horton-Tucker should probably get more minutes, and I think there's a reason to believe that. Talen Horton-Tucker had a very good preseason, but I don't think they should jump the gun with him. I think Vogel needs to integrate him in an effective way so it not only improves how the team is doing, but it also forwards his progression as an NBA player. It's only his second season, and it's going to be a pretty big year for him, so there's things to definitely look forward to. I think just the Lakers are expecting a lot of bounce-back performances from a couple of players, but it's definitely lots of upside from the Schroeder-Harrell connection. There were a lot of good alley-oops and good passes from them, so a lot of good connections there, aside from their original, superstar LeBron Davis duo. But at the end of the day, the Warriors game, like I said, was a pretty dud fest. Definitely great to see Kyrie and Kevin Durant do very well on the offensive end tonight. And as for this Lakers game, it was obviously good to see them get their ring ceremony. They're the defending champs now, but they came up a little short against the Los Angeles Clippers tonight. So I think that's going to be it. I'll probably recap a couple games for tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you, and peace.